right, get your Bibles out. Let's do a few drills here. Present arms. Starts out with an easy one. Luke 7:47. Charge. Okay. Present arms. Pulls them up. Luke 6:38. Charge. You were just there almost. Okay. There we go. Present arms. Where should we go? 2 Samuel 24:24. Charge. Okay. Present arms. Proverbs 3:9. Charge. All right, last one. Present arms. Ezekiel 22:30. Charge. Ready? Hey, good catch. Good catch. All right. First Sunday of the month. If you have any loose change in your pocket, or if you stuck that $20 bill that you found in your pocket, that counts too. So. So, empty your pockets. Anybody else? Is that all the better? Oh, there is a dollar bill in there. All right. We're going to talk about money today in our Sunday school class a little bit. We're going to talk about mites. That doesn't sound good, does it? A mite, that's a little bug. Anyway, it was a form of money. So we're going to talk about that. So let's have God's Green Growers go. We'll send them that way when they warriors, you may go. Teens, you may go. Rest of you stay where you are. What? We're going to be in Mark chapter 12 this morning. Mark chapter 12. Everybody's weekend going okay so far? Anybody go see fireworks last night? One? Yeah. All the shows we saw last night for some reason. I mean, the lakes and stuff had all their fireworks shows last night instead of on the 4th. But well, there you go. There you go. Really? Really? Oh. Oh, I don't know. All right, Mark chapter 12 is where we're at. Verse 41. I want to read just a few verses, and it's a short text this morning as we look at another anonymous personality. Mark chapter 12, verse 41. It says, "And Jesus sat over against the treasury and beheld how the people cast money into the treasury. And many that were rich cast in much. And there came a certain poor widow, and she threw in 2 mites, which make a farthing. And he called unto him his disciples, and saith unto them, Verily I say unto you, that this poor widow hath cast more in than all they which have cast into the treasury. For all they did cast in of their abundance, but she of her want did cast in all that she had, even all her living." All right, so let's open in prayer. Father, I pray that you bless the Sunday school hour together as we look at this, another example of someone who we have no name for, but someone who was used as an example for us to learn from. As we pray in Jesus' name, amen. All right, let's get just a little bit of background here. This is what's often referred to as Passion Week. Right? This is Christ's final week on earth. And Jesus had led his disciples to the city of Jerusalem for the final Passover feast. And the triumphal entry had taken place. On Monday, he cursed the fig tree, cast them out that sold and bought in the temple. Well, then on Tuesday morning, he came to the temple, and he was teaching them. And then it says, we notice there, verse 41, as he sat there, it says he beheld how people cast money into the treasury. And so he was just observing there. But as he observed, we notice here that there was one poor widow, and I mean poor in every sense of the word, not just that poor lady, but she had nothing to her name. But it says she came in, verse 42, and she threw in 2 mites, which make a farthing. A mite was the smallest denomination of coin that Israel had in those days. It was equal to 1/4 of a penny, approximately. Okay? And a penny in those days was typically regarded as what? A day's wages. Okay, so we could think of it as 1/4 of a day's wages, whatever that might be. But she cast in 2 mites into the offering. And so Jesus called his disciples over and wanted to teach them a quick lesson. And he said, you see that poor widow there? Said she put into the treasury far more than any of these other men who, with the garments, rich garments and everything they had. She gave more than anyone else. Why? Because it says she gave, again, verse 44, she gave all that she had, even all her living. All right, so again, we don't know her name. We don't know even where she was from. No, none of that. She's simply another one of the anonymous personalities of the Bible, but she was the woman who gave all she had. Sometimes we hear that term, well, they gave everything they had, but she literally, and it's made very clear there, gave all that she had. And so let's look at this widow a little bit. It's kind of a short lesson, and so I've got a supplement here by way of parallel to further drive home the truth if we need it for time's sake. But first of all, notice here the giver. She was a widow. It says there came a certain poor widow. Now that would have meant she had nobody to provide for her. Right? In those days, remember, they didn't have Social Security. They didn't have Medicare. They didn't have retirement plans and all of that. In fact, the way they were provided for was typically the field owners were told to leave a little bit of extra grain in the field so the widows, and even sometimes strangers, but so the widows could have a little bit to eat, could gather for themselves so they could eat. But she had no other income as a widow. She may have, now we don't know, she may have had a side gig, okay? I mean, she may have washed laundry for people. We don't know any of that, but that's kind of irrelevant because he says that she gave everything she had, as we'll get to in just a moment. So we don't know any of those things, but again, we do know that she came with a heart that wanted to give to honor the Lord. And so she was poor, she was a widow, she had great faith in God. Again, giving all that she had. What was she going to do the next day? She had no more money, right? That's called faith, right? Now, understand this, the Bible nowhere does it say that we're to live as paupers, to give everything we have and just, have nothing for tomorrow. But what an example of faith that this woman had. She didn't know, again, how she would buy food, pay her bills, even make it through the next day, but she knew this is what God wanted her to do. Luke 6:38 is one of the verses I handed out. That's a promise from God, isn't it? Okay, I'm sorry. That's a promise of God, isn't it? That if we give out of a heart of love, for whatever it might be, to the honor of the Lord in whatever way, He promises He's going to give back. And you've always heard the saying, you can't outgive God, and that's kind of a cliche, but that's true. That's true, isn't it? That God always honors faithfulness. And that heart of giving to others. Again, it said pressed down, shaken together. And I don't know if the word abundant was used, but that's kind of the idea there. He'll give you, bless you, in fact, in better ways than just money, right? When we have a heart, a giving heart. And so we noticed that she had faith in God. Then we noticed that, and she was trusting God to take care of her. That was the principle, too, by the way, in the wilderness, right, with the manna, was that they were supposed to trust God one day at a time. They couldn't gather 2 days' food because it would spoil. And so every day they had to wake up and go to bed and say, well, tomorrow God's going to provide. And even though we may have income and things come in our life, we still need to have that same kind of faith because that income could disappear, couldn't it, overnight. But so we see the gift there, and we already mentioned this, but it says she threw in 2 mites. Verse 42 there it says, which make a farthing. And it says she gave all that she had. She didn't have much to give, but what she had, she gave it to the Lord. Proverbs 3:9 is another verse. All right, honor the Lord with thy substance and with all of thine increase. And so we're to honor Him with everything we have, right? And we know that it all belongs to Him anyway. I mean, He is the giver of all things, and so how can we be stingy with His things? He's given it to us to use appropriately and to use to honor Him. And again, whatever way that might be. It doesn't mean, again, you give it all to the church per se, but we honor Him in how we use that money or gifts. We even brought it out, obviously, even more so. But all that He has given us, He just wants us to be faithful. And to honor Him with it. Not to spend it frivolously, not to spend it on self necessarily, but just honor Him in whatever way it might be. So her giving here cost her something. Okay, it cost her something. In fact, again, all that she had, everything she had, and she knew that if anything was worth, I mean, if her religion was worth it, it's going to cost something. If we want to serve the Lord, honor the Lord, it's going to cost us something. Okay, it may not be dollars and cents. This is the mic that evidently increases in volume. So, but it's going to cost us something: time, treasure, talent, whatever. It's going to cost us something to serve the Lord. 2 Samuel 24:24.
And the king said unto Ornan, Nay, but I will surely buy it of thee at a price. Neither will I offer burnt offerings unto the Lord my God of that which doth cost me nothing. So David bought the threshing floor and the oxen for 50 shekels of silver.
Okay, did you hear that? Neither will I offer burnt offerings unto the Lord my God of that which cost me nothing. It's, how do I want to say this? I mean, it's not cheap. I mean, he desires us to give back of what he has given us. There is in Malachi, there's an indictment against the people because when it came to their tithing, what they were doing instead of what they were supposed to do, because there was 3 different tithes in the Old Testament, but to tithe of their flocks, they were supposed to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the 10th one was to be dedicated to the Lord. But it indicates there what they were doing was they were looking for the sick animals, the animals that nobody else wanted, and that's the one they would give to the Lord. They weren't giving the 10th of the flock. They were giving what was no good to them, no use to them. And sometimes if we're not careful, we can be the very same way. Well, I don't need this, so I'll just give it to God. Neither will I offer burnt offerings to the Lord that which doth cost me nothing. It cost her something. In fact, it cost her everything that she had. There's an illustration given here in the book about a lady who had 2 sons. I'll just read it to you. One surrendered to go as a missionary to the foreign field. He soon caught a terrible disease and died. His younger brother said, I will go and take my brother's place on the same foreign field and continue his great work. This son soon caught the same disease and died also, being buried alongside his brother. When their mother heard about the death of her second son, she was brokenhearted, went to her church grieving. The church members told her they were praying for her as she grieved over her loss. She answered them, I am not grieving over the loss of my 2 sons. I'm grieving over the fact that I have no other son to give to the Lord for the same cause. Wow. I don't know if it's a true story or not, but that would certainly be something amazing, wouldn't it? But this gift she gave was a proof of her love for God. Love causes a person to sacrificially give for the one that he loves. And there's another verse, Luke 7:47, the last one that we had.
Wherefore I say to thee, her sins which are many are forgiven, but she loved much. But to whom little is forgiven, the same loveth little.
To whom little is forgiven, the same loveth little. If it doesn't cost you much, it means there's not much love. And as parents, you know that you gave everything you had when you were raising your children. Why? Because you loved them. You didn't want them to go without. You gave them the roof over the head, the food, and all. It may not have much at times, but you gave them what you had, right? Because of love. Same thing in a marriage. Same thing in whatever relationship you might be talking about. And so it showed that she truly loved God. And there's also an old saying that if you show me your checkbook, I can tell you where your love is. Or where your priorities are, and that's true, isn't it? But she loved the Lord, and she honored him with it. But then the final thing mentioned here is the glory of the widow. Verse 41, where it says, And Jesus sat over against the treasury and beheld how the people cast money into the treasury. Jesus noticed her love, her gift. Jesus was watching. And guess what? Jesus knows our heart too, doesn't he? He knows our gift, and he sees it, and he honors it. It's not to be given to be in the sight of men. Scripture tells us that, right? Where it's not so that we can boast. That's maybe perhaps what some of these other men wanted people to see. These rich men, maybe wanted to see everybody to see what they gave. I don't know, but that's not what it's about, is it? God sees it, even if no one else sees it. God sees it, and he honors it. And so he used this woman as an example, not just to his disciples, but guess what? She's recorded in the history forever of her amazing gift of just half a penny in that day and time. But she was honored for it because, again, she loved the Lord and she gave all that she had. So the Lord today watches, even today, as people give to his word. Again, not just money, but whatever it might be. How can we not give back to one who gave his all for us? But she became famous for her little gift she gave to the Lord. And one more illustration here of a man who was asked by his rich friend, to give a contribution to a charitable cause. And his friend said, yes, I guess I must give you my 2 mites like the poor widow lady in the Bible. Well, the friend asked him, well, how much are you worth? The rich man answered, $70,000. Obviously, this is many years ago, but the friend said, well, I shall be satisfied with only half as much as the widow gave then. Just write the check out for $35,000 because the widow gave everything she had. And so if he was going to give like the widow might, he would have given it all, right? So we see this example, this poor widow, that no doubt probably has encouraged millions of people throughout history to go ahead and give what little they have. And there's sometimes an attitude that we can say, or that people say, well, I don't have much to contribute. Again, be it money, be it time, be it talent, whatever. I don't have much to contribute, so I can't do anything. Well, that's exactly opposite of what it says here, right? Whatever we have, he says we're to use, to give. Even if it's little. And we know examples, right? The boy with the lunch, okay, in Scripture and all of those sorts of things. But let me go to Matthew chapter 25. Any comments thus far? Again, I told you it was a short lesson, but I want to go to Matthew 25, and this is familiar to us as well, but just point out 3 quick things here that still apply today, okay? Matthew 25, and we won't go through all of this background, but Jesus is teaching. In fact, this is, if I'm not mistaken, in the time frame, this would have happened at the same time or right after what we just talked about, okay, the widow's mite. He goes into this Olivet Discourse, it's called, but this teaching, and he talks about giving. He talks about stewardship. Verse 14, about a man traveling to far country, he called his servants and he delivered unto them his goods. Let's just notice a couple things. Again, I'm not read everything, but just skim down through here. First thing I want us to notice here is that he gave to all. Verse 14 and 15 says he delivered his goods. Verse 15, unto one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1. To every man according to his several ability, and straightway took his journey. But it says he gave to each one. You notice that in verse 15? He gave 1 5, 1 2, 1, but he gave each one something. Okay? Everything belonged to the master. That's important to understand. It was his goods, but he distributed them. He gave them to each one. Again, we know talent, that's a measure of money. We use it as a term of ability today. And we can apply it that way, but any gift or ability God gives us, a resource he gives us and trusts to us, but it belongs to him. Okay? It comes from him. And so he gave to every man, we notice there. As long as the Lord leaves us here, he gives us something. He gives us opportunities. He gives us, again, maybe resources. He gives us abilities. He gives us time. And he wants us to use that time wisely and to use that time for him. So he gave to every man, and he does the same thing today. You have something that he's given you that you can use for him. Okay? Even if you say, I don't have much, but you've got something. Okay? But he gave to each one. And then also, I want to notice here, he gave the same instruction. Verse 16, then he that had received the 5 talents went and traded with the same and made them other 5 talents. And likewise, he that had received 2, he also gained other 2. But he that had received 1 went and digged in the earth and hid his Lord's money. The instruction, in fact, in Luke's parallel account, he says, the master went away and he told them to occupy until I come, until I return. And the word occupy there doesn't just mean just sit, just be present. That's kind of what occupy we might think it means. But occupy means to be busy, to put to use. In other words, to invest it. So they all had the same instructions. I'm giving you this, and I want you to do something with it. Okay? I want you to use it, that which I've given you. So they all had the same instruction. And so he gave each one different abilities, different amounts. Today he gives us different abilities, different amounts, different gifts, if you will, opportunities. But our responsibility is exactly the same. Do something with it. Don't just let it sit. Don't do as this one man, and we'll see the end here in a few moments, but this man who just went and dug a hole and buried it because he didn't want to lose what he had. Okay? And so we're not to bury it. We're to use it, that which he gives us. So he gave the same instruction. They were to use what he had given, but also, and this is, I'm just throwing this in there, kind of an implied thing, but they were not to complain about what they didn't have. Again, one had 5, another had 2, another had 1. They were to use what they had. They were not to sit there and complain about what they didn't get or why somebody else got more than they got. Have you ever, and I've heard people say this or do, I got shorted on talent, or they, if only I had what they had, the talent they have, or if only I had the resources they had, think what I could do. If only, and sometimes churches get into that too, right? Why can't we have what that ministry has? Is that what we're supposed to be busy doing? No. They weren't supposed to spend their time in let's just call it what it is, jealousy or discontent, because that robs us of our blessing. Okay? So they weren't to complain about what they didn't have. They were simply to use what they did have. And by the way, when our focus is on the material, we'll never be content because our joy is always going to be based upon external appearance rather than spiritual reality. And I've said this before, we'll never enjoy our current blessings if we're always wishing we had more, regardless of what it is. We'll never be content, never enjoy what we have now if we're always wanting something else, something more. So he gave to all, he gave the same instructions. They were to use what they were given. And then thirdly, finally, we know, verse 19, that he held each one accountable for what they did. Verse 19, it says, after a long time, the Lord of those servants cometh and reckoneth with them. Time for accounting here. Verse 20, and so he did that had received, and so he that had received 5 talents came and brought other 5 talents, saying, Lord, thou deliverest to me 5 talents. Behold, I've gained beside 5 more talents. And his Lord said, well done, good and faithful servant. But the Lord reckoned with them. It was a time of accounting. And this is my own picture in my mind, but the description of the judgment seat of Christ, it's not going to be based upon, it's not for salvation. It's not a judgment of sin. Okay, it's to recognize, and it's a time of reward, right? But in my mind, I imagine a very similar scenario where the simple question is, what did you do with what I gave you? Right? Not just what did you do? I mean, that's a big question. But what did I do with what I gave you? I kind of picture in this parable, that's kind of the meaning, or the picture of perhaps what type of scenario will be there at that judgment seat of Christ. And so we can say, well, I invested it in this, this, and this, and this is the result. Or we can say, well, I didn't want to risk it, and so I just kind of sat on it. Well, we know what took place here. So we notice that if we squander our time, our talent, our treasure on self-pleasure, self-contentment, we're going to give an account. Not to the pastor, not to the neighbors, not to one another, but to the Lord himself when he returns. But we notice here a couple things as we wrap up. The Lord rewarded the faithful. Verse 20, we started to read that. He came and he said, I've gained 5 talents. Verse 21, his Lord said to him, well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of the Lord. And then the same thing with the 2 talents. He said, I used those 2 talents. I invested it and gained 2 other talents beside them. Verse 23, his Lord said, well done, good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of the Lord. Same response, right? The one had 5, the one had 2. Wasn't what they had. It wasn't what they started with that mattered. It wasn't what they ended up with that mattered. It was what they did with what they were given. That's what made the difference. That's what mattered. And so Matthew 25 is where we are, Steve. We're almost done, but Matthew 25, because we're going quick here this morning. But anyway, he rewarded the faithful. And the reward was what? The joy of the Lord. Entering the joy of the Lord, with the joy of the Lord. Not only did he reward the faithful, but we also know he reprimanded the idle. Verse 24. Then he which had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew thee that thou art a hard man, reaping where thou hast not sown, and gathering where thou hast not strawed. And I was afraid, and went and hid thy talent in the earth. Lo, there thou hast, that is thine. Again, he said, well, I knew that you were expecting something, and I didn't want to risk losing it. And so I just went and buried it, but I've still got it. Well, look what he said, verse 26. The Lord answered and said to him, Thou wicked and slothful servant, thou knewest that I reap where I sowed not, and gather where I have not strawed. Thou oughtest therefore to have put my money to the exchangers, and then at my coming I should have received mine own with usury. He said you should have invested it. If you knew I was such a hard, if you think I was such a hard leader or hard ruler, hard master, he said you would have done more. You would have tried harder to use what I gave you. And so what was the punishment? Look at verse 28. First of all, he said, Therefore he took the talent from him and gave it unto him which had 10 talents. So the reward or the punishment was the taking of the unused talent. And I've said this before, but if we're unwilling to use what God has given us for his honor and glory, he may just take it. He may just take it away. But not only that, even worse than that, the punishment was sorrow. Sorrow and remorse. Verse 29 and 30. Everyone that hath shall be given, unto everyone that hath shall be given, and he shall have abundance, but from him that hath not shall be taken away even that which he hath. And cast ye the unprofitable servant into outer darkness, there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And so as we just kind of summarize here and think about this, again, remember the issue was not what they'd received, the issue what they ended up with. The issue was, what did you do with what I gave you? That was the question when he returned. What did you do with what I gave you? He didn't expect him to bring something that was far beyond what he had given them. But he simply said, I just wanted faithfulness. I just wanted you to invest what I gave you. And so then the question comes back to us, how are we investing what he gives us? Time, treasure, as they say, talent, whatever. How are we investing what he has given us? And we go back to the widow in our main lesson here, who gave only half a cent, 2 mites. But she was honored. Why? Because she gave all that she had. Not just out of abundance, but as he said there in the passage there in Mark, he gave out of her need. He gave what she couldn't afford to give. And again, God doesn't expect us to live as paupers and all of that, but certainly he expects us to invest what he gives us to honor him, whatever it might be. And if we do that, what will he do? We'll enter the joy of the Lord. I hope we'll have the joy of the Lord, and he will bless us for it. Any comments? And we're still done about 5-6 minutes early, but about 5 minutes early. I know those are all familiar principles to you, but just the example of this widow is probably should put us to shame sometimes, right? We've got all kinds of money to spend on frivolous things sometimes, just for our own comfort. And again, I'm not, I've got comforts, obviously, that I don't deserve, and I could live without. Many things I could live without. But even those things he wants us to honor him with, right? At every opportunity. So, all right. Any comments? Questions? Jokes? No. I forgot, consequently, I realized last Sunday, I guess I realized, it was 2 Sundays ago was Father's Day, right? Yeah, 3rd Sunday, yeah. I forgot to show my dad joke video. So dad joke survivors. I showed it one other year, but kids, survivors of bad dad jokes. So maybe I'll have to pull it out some Sunday night and just do it just for. So, anyway. So we could sit here and tell dad jokes, but that's. But the church we were at Sunday night, where we took Brother Billa, they had left over from the previous Sunday, but an insert in their bulletin. It was like a 2 or 3 page thing, but dad jokes, that they put in their bulletin. So I kept that. I've got it in my office in case I ever need. Anyway. So. All right. Well, if there's nothing else, let's close in prayer, and we're so thankful for it. And your desire and instruction is the same to us as it was there in the parable that we looked at. That just to occupy, to invest, to use what you've given us to glorify you. And if we do that, you will reward us. If we don't, there will be sorrow and regret. But Father, so we just thank you for your many gifts to us. May we be faithful where you've put us, using what you've given us for your honor and glory. Pray for the service to follow here in just a short time, that you would be honored in it on this